The Wyatt Family. It's hard not to remember them and have a big smile on your face, especially if you're a fan of pro wrestling and horror movies. It's been over 7 years since their chapter together officially came to a close, but the men involved will always be interconnected, even beyond the realms of this current lifetime. Characters that were so special, they'll be remembered by a generation of wrestling fans. We tend to think of the Wyatt family primarily as the 3 core members, and we'll cover that, even though they've had 7 members overall, ranging from one night to a whole year. They were lightning in a bottle, but to say that WWE really just missed the mark with executing on their potential would sort of be an understatement. Their tenure together lasted really a little less than 4 years, if you look at the periods that they were together. With the upcoming rumored arrival of Uncle Howdy and the revival of all things Wyatt in WWE, what do you think of their lasting legacy and how it will evolve in this new iteration? Let us know in the comments below. It was still infuriating to some degree for either diehard or even casual fans to see how this team that's so capable of so much more never really got to do more than just a certain amount. But maybe that was just beyond their control. So what went wrong with the Wyatt family? And why did WWE miss the opportunity to create a faction on the same level as The Shield or The New Day? Or did they create a faction on that level and we're just simply taking them for granted? We're going back to 2012 when Bray Wyatt, Luke Harper, and Erick Rowan were still in the developmental stages of their WWE career. It was a torn pectoral muscle for Bray Wyatt that had him ultimately lead to creating the group. In his brief stint in WWE NXT, which was still very much a bright group of young talent being developed under WWE's new system, he was out of action and ended up adopting 2 sons. A lonesome trucker by the name of Luke Harper, who wrestled on the Independents as Brody Lee, and the big, ferocious, red-bearded Viking, who's not a Viking, Erick Rowan. Wyatt himself had already tried his hand at becoming a leader. Wyatt had been led by other talents, competing in the NXT game show days, and had a very short stint on the main roster. But now, rebooting himself, he was leading other people, and led Rowan and Harper to the inaugural NXT Championship titles. Bray Wyatt's sons, as he dubbed them, eventually captured the prize and held on to it for a few months. But the NXT Tag Team titles would have taken a back seat because the trio were due for their main roster call-up because of their out-of-the-screen mysticism. They were something different. They were something that felt like it needed to be seen by more eyeballs. In late May of 2013, WWE began airing vignettes to foreshadow the debut of the Wyatt family on Monday Night Raw. Only the small niche crowd that watched Bray Wyatt on NXT knew what he was capable of. He was a second-generation talent, he knew the business, and he was playing with characters, ideas, and concepts that really no one was doing in the wrestling landscape, especially in WWE. It felt like something very unique. In a somewhat supernatural presentation, the Wyatt family were getting ahead of their debut instantly and made comparisons to The Undertaker. Yeah, they were getting the vignette rollout with hype built in before they were ever seen by the mainstream audience. But in reality, Bray Wyatt represented more than just a cult leader and a supernatural figure. Wyatt was akin to a cult itself. They targeted Undertaker's brother, Kane, as a wise choice, played into the kind of imagery that WWE wanted to present in the Wyatt family, and it led to the biggest win of a young Bray Wyatt's career at SummerSlam that year. The sight of Harper and Rowan carrying the big red machine away from the ring was surreal, and once again led to the Undertaker comparisons. And that didn't really help anybody in the long run. These guys were still new to a lot of people, and they were already tangling with the big bad voodoo daddies of WWE in Kane and The Undertaker, and now they had to deliver on that hype. But overall, it was a great way to introduce the Wyatt family as a dominant force. Even Harper and Rowan went on a bit of an undefeated streak for a few months before the brother duo of Cody Rhodes and Goldust defeated them in October of that year. Within a few months of their debut, they found themselves feuding with 2 bona fide multi-time champions in CM Punk and Daniel Bryan. As you might recall, that feud really boiled down to Bray Wyatt trying to cast a spell over Daniel Bryan and his crew, beating him down into submission until he finally agreed to join the cult. It really came to a head, though, because this was in conflict with the entire rise of Daniel Bryan as a solo superstar and the abrupt exit of CM Punk from WWE. In mid-January 2014, when Daniel Bryan defected from the group in front of the wildest crowd reaction inside a steel cage, gave us an iconic moment where he sat on top of that steel cage and got the entire crowd to start chanting yes. It was perfectly synced in unison, and it wouldn't have been as big a moment without Bray Wyatt being the fundamental evil foe. The idea of him casting spells and mind trickery over his opponents and those he's made loyal to him defined his character. Yeah, it may have launched Daniel Bryan, but it really showed you what Bray was capable of. Bryan may have won the battle, but Bray won the war when he defeated him in the 2014 Royal Rumble to end their short but memorable feud. Shield versus the Wyatts family in hindsight was one of those rare moments where everything clicked and everyone played their role to perfection, and WWE really nailed the presentation of it. Sitting at home, they ate it up, and for good reason. There were pauses where you could just see the crowd when they faced off at Elimination Chamber, just eating up the moment, and these two groups were determined to deliver on the hype. And on that night, the Wyatts picked up a decisive victory against the Shield. Of course, there were a lot of Monday morning quarterbacks after this pay-per-view claiming that this match, which was not too long before WrestleMania, should have been a WrestleMania match. No, we got the Shield versus Kane and the New Age Outlaws instead. This instant classic six-man tag team match has a current CageMatch.net rating of 9.1 out of 10. That's right. After the Wyatts went 2-0 against the Shield after another win against them on Monday Night Raw, WWE decided to blow the whole thing off on an episode of the most forgettable TV show that WWE has, Main Event. Some of you are being reminded that Main Event is a TV show, and I agree with you. There's probably some great matches on there that we're not catching. What other great matches should we know about? Tell us in the comments. It was all too brief, but that's probably for the best because it may not have been the most memorable as it lasted longer than a month. The next rivalry would be a very special one that fans had anticipated for a long time. As evil as Bray Wyatt was, he needed to face someone who was quite the opposite. That's right, John Cena, the most idealistic babyface of a generation, and they would face off at WrestleMania New Orleans with a battle of morals with John Cena, who always had his detractors finally turn heel, finally give himself a little bit more of a gritty edge. Yeah, he never succumbed to the opportunity to do so, even with Bray Wyatt offering to turn his back and let him get hit with a chair. No, Cena picked up the victory against Bray, a match that some people thought could have been a really defining victory for Bray Wyatt. And John Cena was no longer the absolute top of the card guy anymore. He could have took the hit, right? Instead, yeah, we got Cena wins. After this, Bray Wyatt found himself in the mix for the Money in the Bank ladder match, but obviously didn't walk away with the briefcase. He then set his sights on the verified great veteran in Chris Jericho. A feud that many felt on paper would have been exciting, but was pretty solid. Not the barn burner it could have been. Yeah, he lost to Jericho at the Battleground Premium Live Event pay-per-view back then, got his win back at SummerSlam, but the best match they would have wouldn't be on pay-per-view or streaming on the WWE Network paywall. No, it was a steel cage match on Monday Night Raw, where the Wyatts at ringside, Harper and Rowan, were able to keep Jericho from escaping the cage. Bray Wyatt would batter his knee, and they would scramble with the cage door open, and Bray Wyatt stumbling out to victory. It's one of the better WWE cage matches in the 2010s on television. And then, suddenly after that, the Wyatt family was disbanded, at least for the first time, after just 1 year together on the main roster where they were very, very over and crowds would lose their minds, waving their cell phones in the air, singing, "He's got the whole world." Yeah, perhaps the idea of turning Bray Wyatt into a big single star meant he had to get away from Rowan and Harper. but that really didn't do much for anybody. Although Luke Harper did briefly become the Intercontinental Champion and had some banger underrated matches around this time. After a brief reunion at the Royal Rumble that ended with the three men brawling with each other, they once again went their separate ways. Bray Wyatt had another lose a big one match against The Undertaker at WrestleMania. This was The Undertaker coming back from losing the streak, yes, to Brock Lesnar, but he didn't appear at all in the entire build to the match that was built around Bray Wyatt leaning into the supernatural and not The Undertaker, the most supernatural guy. It was weird. 2015 overall was kind of a bland year for WWE, and arguably one of the weaker ones, considering the whole PG thing. WWE just had an inconsistency issue overall. Apart from Seth Rollins having a run as World Heavyweight Champion, Bray Wyatt's rivalry with Roman Reigns was a pretty memorable one around this time. Despite the up-and-down booking, Bray Wyatt was established as a real bad dude that some fans would get behind, and there were still mixed responses to Roman Reigns. He went over the women and children, but the buddies in the audience, the bros, were still running with Bray. Their feud got very, very serious and had maybe one of the most underrated Hell in a Cell matches of all time. A show that WrestleZone.com tweeted out was a show stealer on that year's Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. This led to the reunion of the Wyatt family, with Luke Harper first helping Bray defeat Roman Reigns before Braun Strowman would be introduced as the Black Sheep. Yes, that Braun Strowman, and the newest addition to the fold on a Monday Night Raw after SummerSlam. Braun Strowman should have ideally added a whole new layer of intrigue to the Wyatt family in this incarnation. But it's important to remember that the guy who was called upon to perform in front of millions of people live every single week literally had 7 matches in his professional wrestling career at that time. Erick Rowan would also return and make it a 4-person unit. The Wyatt family should have been stronger than ever. But we know you're out there watching, and if you remember what happened, you're going to be pessimistic and say, but that's not what happened. Yeah, because that's not what happened. After Bray Wyatt lost to Roman Reigns in a pretty darn good Hell in a Cell match I mentioned earlier, he targeted The Undertaker, who needed his opponent for the 25th anniversary of the show where he debuted the Survivor Series. Bray and Luke Harper teamed up in a losing effort to the Brothers of Destruction, Kane and The Undertaker, and that didn't do them any favors with their overall image. This was the supernatural parallel to them. This could have been a really great moment, and would Undertaker be any less of a legend? Would Kane be any less of a legend if they lost this match? Yeah, I know, retrospective booking of a match over 10 years ago, or nearly 10 years ago. We get the WWE would want The Undertaker to have the wholesome moment in his 25th anniversary, but sacrificing the Wyatt family at that very moment proved to be a bad decision week to week. Even after a one-sided feud against a few ECW legends that was brief, the Wyatt family lost a lot of their momentum and were struggling despite regular TV time and all of the support and production behind everything that the Wyatts required to be the Wyatts on TV. The up and down of a WWE career continued its way up for Bray Wyatt, heading into 2016 when he and the Wyatt family targeted Brock Lesnar and eliminated him from the Royal Rumble. It was seemingly going to be a very odd pairing. We were going to get Bray Wyatt and his supernatural faction against the legitimate badass skills of a former UFC champion. And it would be a marquee match at WrestleMania. Except that's not how things played out. Dean Ambrose ended up being the opponent for Brock Lesnar in a match that some feel just also didn't live up to its marquee value and was considered a stinker in some reviews. Bray Wyatt wasn't even technically on the card. The Wyatt family would have a role on WrestleMania, the grandest stage of them all, against the biggest movie star in the world, returning to the WrestleMania stage for a 6-second match. Erick Rowan with the Wyatts at ringside, a 6-second match. You know he didn't win it. Yeah, that's kind of obvious. The Wyatt family were just used as a prop-up for The Rock and John Cena to get their big pop. Now, clearly they played a big role. They were the bad guy faction. But that's kind of all it was becoming. They would be built up only to lose against big names, but never get the rub themselves. and WWE did follow up on the Brock Lesnar match, and it just wasn't a singles match. Instead, it was Luke Harper and Bray Wyatt facing Brock Lesnar in a handicap match on a WWE Network special before WrestleMania, and Lesnar won in a whopping 4-minute match where Wyatt never even entered the ring. So, yeah, that was working a genuinely new and exciting direction, though, post-WrestleMania 32. Despite all the bad handling they had to go through, the Wyatts still had a lot of love from the fans, who recognized their potential and were getting into the entire lore of everything Wyatt, where that house was, and who these characters were. WWE seemed to be setting the wheels in motion for the Wyatts to finally become good guys, fan favorites. The 2 whole weeks that lasted. It was great, it was different, but Bray Wyatt suffered an injury at a live event, and those plans, circumstantially, had to be scrapped. When he returned a few months later, New Day, a bright and positively minded, comedically oriented group who needed to be tested and needed to be pushed. Yeah, but they would unfortunately be presented in something that felt like a ripoff of what TNA Wrestling was doing with the broken Matt Hardy, which saw them having a big fight on the Wyatt compound. It wasn't exactly inspiring, but that doesn't mean it wasn't a fun match. It wasn't featured on a premium live event, but rather on an episode of Monday at Raw. The newly reintroduced brand split at the time proved to be the catalyst, though, for a change for the Wyatt family yet again. WWE reportedly around this time had their sights on making big Braun Strowman into a singles main event monster, and they separated from the group and drafted him to Raw. Bray Wyatt and Erick Rowan were drafted to SmackDown. Rowan would unfortunately suffer an injury that prevented him from being a part of what would be the new lineup. The deeply layered character of Bray Wyatt would now find methodical opposition in Randy Orton. And also around this time, Luke Harper would return to the fold to be at his side. This time, though, Randy Orton would fall under the spell of the Wyatt family after their pursuit of his allegiance, becoming an official member of the group. This was an intriguing reversal of roles for Randy Orton. He had led factions, been a manipulator, been a real mind game player himself, and now he was being played. Or was he playing Bray Wyatt the entire time? Yeah, a lot of us saw that on the surface, and though it was played out week to week and even saw the pairing win a tag team championship on SmackDown together, it was certainly a very interesting thing. The trio of Wyatt, Harper, and Orton would defend the SmackDown titles under the Freebird rule. The reign wasn't meant to last long because there was a much bigger plan ahead. To start 2017, Orton would go on to win the Royal Rumble for the second time in his career, while Bray Wyatt became the WWE Champion, dethroning John Cena in a star-studded Elimination Chamber match. All of the dots were connecting. When were we going to see it? It may have been predictable, but you wanted the payoff. Randy Orton joining the Wyatt family was a huge win-win situation, because it took him out of the perpetual cycle of being in unimportant storylines and also helped Wyatt and Harper become the twisted characters they were. Orton was always twisted, and first promised not to use his Royal Rumble opportunity to challenge his faction mate Bray Wyatt, but his turn came all too sudden. It was expected. It simply wasn't well executed, though. From here, it was a train wreck in the eyes of some. What started off strong just wasn't going to keep its momentum. It was pure week-to-week storyline, sports entertainment, but the match that they would build to at WrestleMania for the WWE Championship simply wouldn't pay off. Yeah, involved those projections of worms and bugs on the ring. A little bit too much of the sports entertainment stuff, right? That's how it ended. It would have been okay if Bray Wyatt retained the title, but Randy Orton won it at WrestleMania, and it just felt like, okay, sure. Yeah, this in and of itself effectively marked the end of the Wyatt family, and not the Wyatt story, obviously. They would briefly be together after WrestleMania before quietly disbanding, and the official run of the faction had come to a close. It's hard to believe that more time has passed since the Wyatt family disbanded than the entire time they were together. Rowan and Harper would reunite later in 2018, being rebranded as the Bludgeon Brothers, going on to dominate the SmackDown Tag Team division during the Usos' New Day prime time. Luke Harper eventually found himself in a frustrated position, wanting to be released from WWE, but not having that granted until 2019. He had an extremely eventful run in 2020 in All Elite Wrestling, WWE's main competitor, where he rebranded himself as the leader of the Dark Order and would truly become a standout superstar for the breakout promotion. Unfortunately, he would pass away at the age of 41. The large and formidable Erick Rowan found himself in two storylines, one that saw him become Daniel Bryan's sidekick during his Planet Champions era, while the other was a mystery cage at ringside that turned out to be a big mechanical spider. He was also released around the same time as the Wyatt family Luke Harper left the company as well. He would continue to be active in entertainment, performing in small media roles in films and other projects. Braun Strowman, on the other hand, ended up having a lot of success as a single star, the monster among men. But some creative mishandling and a start-and-stop push saw his career have a little bit of a stall. Even when he won the big one, the WWE Universal Championship, which was during those tough early days of the pandemic with no fans, it was because Roman Reigns pulled out of WrestleMania 36. He took it off Goldberg. Strowman was unfortunately the placeholder champion during a very challenging time. That's not something you can blame him. Bray Wyatt, of course, went on to win numerous world championships, cementing an immortal legacy, reinventing himself as more than just the cheap fear takeoff character, but the Fiend. And it was one that some people believe was limited by Vince McMahon's questionable, chaotic changes at the last minute with creative decisions. The pandemic was also challenging for Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman. Both were abruptly released by WWE in those challenging times. Bray and Braun would eventually make their returns separately as solo superstars. Bray Wyatt's return was done with a long, orchestrated puzzle piece piled together of online QR code samples and clues. It was quite cool. When he eventually walked through the curtain and out of the light, the pop was insane. But the return of Bray Wyatt to WWE would be brief. His special place in the heart and minds of fans was unfortunately a fleeting experience, as he would sadly pass away in 2023. It's tragic to think that two key figure members of the Wyatt family are no longer with us, but they have left a lasting impression, together and separately. Nobody even needed the power of retrospect to realize that WWE could have done so much more with the Wyatt family when they were together. The Undertaker comparisons hurt Bray Wyatt a little bit, but he created his own magic, his own phenom, if you will. And the hot and cold handling of that really played a direct role in not sustaining the momentum. It was there. You would feel it when they would come into an arena together. Yeah, and there were so much more expectations to expand the group beyond just men. We never got to see a legitimate Sister Abigail, and of course, Bray Wyatt wearing a cloak against Finn Balor. Let's forget that whole thing, right? Even when they reunited in 2015, it felt like it was just kind of put together, and there was nothing honestly planned, far from how it is now, where there's an actual long-term plan in place for the upcoming arrival of the Wyatt Six, a group that is expected to be led by Uncle Howdy, aka Bo Dallas, Bray Wyatt's brother. There was so much talent in that group, so much larger-than-life personalities that truly brought in a lot of energy and represented audience members that really wanted to see something that felt like it leapt off the page and off the screen. The Wyatt family did that, and they will surely have a place in the WWE Hall of Fame in the future. Rest in peace, Luke Harper. Rest in peace, Bray Wyatt. We can look back in fondness over what was and what they created, those standout moments and that special energy they had every time they performed.